Hey guys, so if you're reading the top of this and you're doing it in the order that I'm telling you to do, you'll notice that I'm doing it, my notes a little bit out of order, but that's okay. So it should say at the top of your notes, biomolecule number 4, nucleic acids. If I were doing this in class, I would do this one last, but because I'm not doing it in class, I want you to do it in a little bit of a different order. And one of the reasons is we don't get really into nucleic acids. I'm going to give you just kind of the bare minimum, and then we spend a whole nother unit talking about nucleic acids. So grab your notes, grab your highlighters, and let's get ready to talk about nucleic acids. So out of our elements of life, our CHNOPs, we need carbon, as always, hydrogen, oxygen, which is normal. So everything we've seen so far has those three things, so we should be expecting that. But as you can see, you have 2 more blanks, so we're going to add some more in here. So we definitely need some nitrogen. So if you think back, we talked about the nitrogen cycle and how bacteria are really important in the nitrogen cycle. They convert atmospheric nitrogen into forms plants can use, and then they build their DNA and proteins. Hint, hint, we haven't gotten there yet, but proteins with nitrogen, and then we get it by eating. So we need nitrogen in order to build one of 2 things, one of which being DNA. And then we're going to throw in some phosphorus here. So out of CHNOPs, it's CHNOP. So just no sulfur, everything but sulfur. So again, write all these down, give them a highlight. You do need to know these. You are responsible for that. The monomer, so the building block, the subunit we are going to use to build nucleic acids, should be easy to remember because it looks and sounds like nucleic acid. It is a nucleotide, so the beginning of the word is exactly the same. So there really shouldn't be any mixing this up with something else. And in the box right next to this, we have some info about the monomer. So there's some stuff we are going to need to know about nucleotides. So they have 3 parts. The first one is a phosphate group, so you're going to write that next to number 1. They're going to have a sugar, and they're going to have something called a nitrogen base, which is where the nitrogen that we're talking about is. So you have phosphate group, a type of sugar, and a nitrogen base. And this is a picture of one. So I would really like it if you paused right now and took a minute to draw it. It doesn't need to be super complicated, but you should have all 3 parts. That's why I gave you a little bit of space next to the 3 lines where you're writing phosphate, sugar, and nitrogen base. So take a minute, pause, and draw. All right, so once you have this drawn, we can move on. So our phosphate, our sugar, and our base, if you couldn't get that from the picture where it is already labeled. So when we take nucleotides and put them together, we can build 2 things. And you have this picture in your notes. And on the left side, it says RNA, ribonucleic acid. On the right side, it says DNA or deoxyribonucleic acid. So we're going to start with RNA first. So RNA is single-stranded. So as you can see in the picture, it has only one strand coming down right here, and it's kind of twisty. The bases, again, we will get into this all in another unit. For right now, you need to know the bases are A, U, G, and C. And if you look at your picture, it stands for A is adenine, which is right here. U is uracil, G is guanine, and C is cytosine. So these are our nitrogen bases, and if you look, it's because they contain nitrogen in addition to carbon and oxygen. So we have our nitrogen bases. That's where the nitrogen exists. RNA is smaller than DNA. Its job, its function, is to help make protein. And the thing that you need to know is about the sugar. It has a ribose sugar instead of the kind that DNA is going to have. So there are some differences. When we get to the DNA side, it is double-stranded. So notice it has 2 strands. On my screen, one's depicted in red, one's depicted in blue, just so you can see the 2. The bases are A, T, G, and C. So A is still adenine, G is still guanine, C is still cytosine, and T is the only one that is different. It is called thymine, but they still are all nitrogen bases. DNA is the information to make protein, so it's an information storage molecule. It can't do anything on its own. It can't actually make the protein. It needs RNA's help to do that, but it just stores the information, kind of like a safe. And then the sugar is called a deoxyribose sugar, which is why it's called deoxyribonucleic acid. So make sure you have this all written down. What I would highlight here is that RNA helps make protein and DNA is the information to make the protein. I think that's incredibly important. That's what I would like for you to remember. All right, polarity and solubility. So is DNA polar? Does it dissolve in the aqueous or watery environment of the cell? Because that's where we find DNA. And yes, the answer is yes. So DNA and RNA are both soluble in water because they have a negative charge. So that phosphorus, a phosphate group, is going to have a negative charge, allowing water to interact with DNA and RNA. So it is polar and soluble in water. And the function in organisms, it's literally just one: to store and transmit or pass on hereditary information to make all the proteins that cells require. So DNA, remember, is the information, that's the storage for making proteins, so it has all the instructions. And RNA is actually going to help the DNA by taking that information and actually telling the cell to make the protein. And again, we're going to spend a whole unit on that, so it's not super important to clarify now. I will talk about it later. So that's everything for nucleic acids that you need to know right now. You should have, again, your elements highlighted, your monomer highlighted, functions in organisms highlighted, and then your little info about DNA and RNA, just the one thing that I told you to highlight for each.